Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the microscopic world of our cells to solve a high-stakes clinical mystery. We're going to piece this together using clues hidden entirely in our biochemistry, focusing on an incredibly vital piece of cellular machinery known as the Pyruvate Dehydrogenase Complex. Let's get right into it. So, picture this. You've got a child sitting in a clinic, and the presentation is, well, it's severe. We're talking developmental delay, ataxia, which is a really profound lack of muscle control, and blood tests that show dangerously elevated lactate alongside high pyruvate levels. It's a massive systemic crisis. But what connects these devastating, wide-reaching neurological symptoms to one tiny cellular machine? To figure that out, we've got to trace the food we eat all the way down to the molecular level.
Section 1. The Metabolic Crossroads. Okay, let's dive into this. When you eat carbohydrates, your body breaks that glucose down into pyruvate. And pyruvate, it's essentially the ultimate metabolic traffic cop. It has a few different paths it can take. It can become lactate, it can turn into the amino acid alanine, or it can even be routed back into making more glucose. But the most crucial path? It's the source of acetyl-CoA. That makes pyruvate the absolute vital link between burning carbs and burning fats. And the gatekeeper deciding if that glucose-derived carbon gets to enter the main energy-producing cycle of the cell, the TCA cycle, that's our star of the show, the Pyruvate Dehydrogenase Complex, or PDH.
Now, when pyruvate actually takes that path toward acetyl-CoA, it goes through what's called oxidative decarboxylation. There are a few key takeaways you should grab from this. First off, this whole thing happens exclusively inside the mitochondrial matrix. Second, it pumps out an energy carrier called NADH. Third, it's the critical bridge between glycolysis and the TCA cycle. But honestly, the absolute most important thing to remember, it is strictly irreversible. Seriously, it's a metabolic point of no return. Once that carbon is clipped off as CO2 and you've made acetyl-CoA, there is absolutely no going back. That carbon is permanently locked into the aerobic metabolism pathway.
Section 2. Inside the molecular machine. Now, what's really fascinating here is that the pyruvate dehydrogenase complex isn't just one simple enzyme. No way. It's this massive multi-enzyme complex that works together like a perfectly timed factory assembly line. Pyruvate comes in on one side, and through a beautifully choreographed dance, acetyl-CoA, CO2, and NADH pop out the other.
It's honestly mind-blowing how efficiently this biological machinery works. It relies on three core robot-like workers, which we just call E1, E2, and E3. So, worker E1, pyruvate dehydrogenase, grabs the pyruvate and actually decarboxylates it, literally stripping away a carbon atom. Then worker E2, dihydrolipoyl transacetylase, takes what's left and snaps that acetyl group onto coenzyme A. Finally, worker E3, or dihydrolipoyl dehydrogenase, steps in as the cleanup crew to reset the whole machine. It regenerates lipoamide and hands off electrons to NAD+ to make NADH. And get this coordinated effort yields energy equivalent to 2.5 ATP per NADH. So this single intermediate step alone is a huge contributor to your overall cellular energy.
But here's the catch. These three worker enzymes can't do this barehanded. They need highly specialized tools. In biochemistry, we call these cofactors. The machine needs exactly 5 of them to run. And here's where your diet comes in. 4 out of these 5 tools come directly from the B vitamins in your morning breakfast. You've got TPP from thiamine, or B1, FAD from riboflavin, B2, NAD+ from niacin, B3, and coenzyme A from pantothenic acid, B5. The only outlier is lipoic acid, which isn't derived from a vitamin. But this perfectly illustrates why vitamins are absolutely essential to our survival. Without them, this microscopic factory literally just grinds to a halt.
Section 3. The Master Control Panel.
So, a machine this powerful obviously can't just run at top speed 24/7, right? The body has to strictly regulate this factory, and it does that through some brilliant feedback loops. The complex is basically constantly checking the cell's bank account. If energy is high, meaning you've got lots of ATP, GTP, NADH, and acetyl-CoA floating around, those molecules act as product inhibitors. They hit the bricks because the cell is already rich in energy. But on the flip side, when energy is low, signals like AMP, calcium, and insulin, especially in your fat tissue, step on the gas and activate the complex, saying, hey, we need to burn some fuel.
If we zoom into the molecular level, this regulation is quite literally a covalent on-off switch, and that switch is phosphorylation. When a kinase enzyme slaps a phosphate group onto the complex, it turns it into the chemically inactive form, which we call PDHB. Glycolysis slows down, energy drops, but when a phosphatase enzyme comes along and clips that phosphate group right back off, boom, it returns to the highly active form, PDHA. It's dephosphorylated, awake, and ready to churn out energy.
Section 4. Toxins and thiamine deficiency.
Okay, so we know how the machine works, and we know how it's controlled. But what happens when things go wrong? The PDH complex is incredibly vulnerable to heavy metals. These things act like ultimate biological saboteurs. Arsenic and mercury poisoning are so devastating precisely because they target this exact system. Arsenite and mercuric ions directly bind to the SH groups of lipoic acid. Remember, that's one of those 5 essential cofactors? By binding to it, they completely paralyze that E2 worker enzyme. The whole complex jams up. Pyruvate backs up like a massive traffic jam. ATP levels absolutely plummet because the TCA cycle is starving for fuel. And all that piled up pyruvate gets forced into becoming lactate.
Now, while heavy metals actively sabotage the factory, dietary deficiencies just straight up starve it of its tools. You see a very similar metabolic roadblock with thiamine deficiency, which is commonly seen in cases of chronic alcoholism. Without thiamine, your body just can't make TPP. And since worker E1 absolutely needs TPP to function, PDH activity falls off a cliff. Just like with heavy metal poisoning, that crucial path to acetyl-CoA is totally blocked off. Pyruvate builds up, gets pushed down the alternate route, and turns into lactate, triggering a really dangerous state of lactic acidosis.
Section 5. Solving the medical mystery.
All right, we've gathered all our biochemical clues. Let's bring this all back to that child patient we talked about at the very beginning of the explainer. We've got severe developmental delay, ataxia, elevated blood lactate, and sky-high pyruvate. So what actually connects all these dots? Well, the answer is a rare inherited disorder known as PDH deficiency. This child was tragically born with a broken microscopic machine. Because their Pyruvate Dehydrogenase Complex is deficient, that critical gateway between glycolysis and the TCA cycle is essentially bricked shut.
And the consequences of missing this one enzyme are just profound. Pyruvate immediately piles up, the body panics and desperately tries to clear it out by converting it into lactic acid, which causes severe lactic acidemia. And because the TCA cycle is being completely starved of acetyl-CoA, overall energy production just crashes. Now think about it. Our brain and nervous system are incredibly energy hungry, so when mitochondrial power drops like that, we see devastating neurological abnormalities. It perfectly explains the ataxia, the psychomotor retardation, and the developmental delays. It's wild to think about, but a failure at one tiny microscopic crossroad manifests as a massive system-wide failure for the patient.
So, we've seen how the Pyruvate Dehydrogenase Complex is the ultimate gatekeeper of our cellular energy. It's an incredibly elegant multi-enzyme factory that runs on vitamins and gets tightly controlled by molecular switches. But man, it is also so fragile. A missing vitamin, exposure to a heavy metal, or a single genetic misprint can completely shut the whole thing down, leaving the body totally starved for power. Which kind of leaves you wondering, if our entire survival literally hinges on a single vulnerable microscopic gateway, how safe are we really from the hidden deficiencies in our daily lives? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the incredible machinery that keeps you alive.